I'm Jim,
And I'm Garrett.
and this is Jim
Jim.
and Garrett at the movies. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Jim and Garrett at the movies. We will be talking about The Front Runner. We will also be, our movie club entry will be Primary Colors, the John Travolta plays Bill Clinton, Mike Nichols movie. And we'll also be doing our obligatory trailer reactions to the three big trailers that dropped recently: Captain Marvel, The Lion King, and Toy Story 4. So, getting right into it, let's talk about The Front Runner. This is the story. It's based upon a book by Matt Bai, who's a political columnist primarily for Yahoo News. He writes the story of the Gary Hart campaign, the failed presidential campaign of Gary Hart, played by Hugh Jackman. Hart's campaign was derailed by a scandal that suggested that he was involved in some quote unquote monkey business. And this is the story of the campaign and how it was woefully unprepared to deal with the scandal. I'll turn it over to Garrett first. Garrett, what did you think of this movie? Did you like it?
I thought this was a very good movie that made me hate everything. It made me hate politics. It made me hate the press. It made me hate the American people. My God, do we suck. It made me feel as though this was the moment in which we started to truly get everything that we absolutely deserved, and it was all awful. Now, none of that is to take anything away from the picture. Like I say, it's a well-made picture. I think it's well acted. It's well paced. The story is sort of coherent and it holds together. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. All of that in the terms of the basic function of what you want out of a story is there. And as far as the cinematic aspects of it, it's all solid. But I'm not sure if it wanted me to come out of the film being a complete and utter misanthrope, but that was the effect that it had.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the effect that it wanted to have. I mean, one of the interesting things about this film is I kind of went into this under I am forced to read the reviews before I go into films because I do the preview segment for the local news channel. And so I gave sort of a synopsis of this film that it lacked a point of view. That was the consensus that was coming out of many of the critics. But I did not find it that way. I found there's certainly to be a point of view, and it is tracing back our personality-obsessed politics to the Gary Hart campaign. Now, I think we could probably, some political scientists would probably take issue with that you might be able to trace back personality-obsessed politics to the Kennedy campaign. You know, there's the ancient story that those who watched the debate thought that Kennedy won the debate, but those who listened to the debate thought that Nixon won the debate. Fine. I mean, that's sort of quibbling. This certainly has a lot to say about now, a lot to say about how the business of governing is what gets put into the back burner, and how ideas and intelligent, well thought out arguments get put on the back burner, whereas we become so obsessed with the scandal of the day and the personality of the private lives of the people. And it's both condemning the American people for that, and it's also condemning the press for that, and it's also condemning the candidate for that, because I mean, this film clearly shows that the Gary Hart campaign was woefully unprepared for this kind of personality obsessed politics, and woefully unprepared to deal with this scandal. So it puts the blame at all parties, and for that, I don't think that you can blame it as a film without a point of view. And so I ended up really liking the ideas of this film. I think that there was kind of a second act lull, but mostly I just wanted to talk about this film with somebody after I saw it. And so I'm talking about it with you. So yeah, what do you want to respond to any of that?
I mean, one of the things that makes it difficult to treat it as a movie, qua movie, is precisely the fact that it keys in so much to what's going on in politics now and has been going on for the last 20 or 30 years or so. I mean, as I was coming out of it, I was, thinking about what might have been, how things could have played out differently, if his campaign had been more prepared, or if he hadn't had the affair in the first place, or if the American media / American public decided they just didn't care and we're going to roll on with it. I
mean,
couldn't help but think about how his situation compared to the situation of Bill Clinton, and then of course later Donald Trump, and how the standards have changed or shift. Are they double standards? Were they appropriate in one context but not in another? And I of course have thoughts on all of these things, but I didn't want our purpose here is not so much supposed to be in talking about contemporary politics. It's supposed to be talking about the film, and it's hard to sort of analyze the film without getting into the contemporary politics. So that makes our job here as film reviewers a little more challenging than usual, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is hard to talk about this film without talking about the issues that it brings up, but that's the film's strength. This film's strength is that it makes us bring up those issues. I remember walking out of other great political films. Bobby, I think, is one. Primary Colors, which we'll talk about later. I remember walking, Wag the Dog. I remember walking out of these films thinking about our current day politics, the then contemporary politics, and even I go back to those films as I watch what's going on in the politics. Brief sort of fact issue: the film never portrays, and in fact, it has never been confirmed that there was an affair between Donna Rice and Hugh Jackman and Gary Hart. So I just wanted to sort of journalistically note that. But yeah, I think that this is a conversation piece, and it's a decently made film that's bringing up really interesting ideas, and it makes me like Matt Bai's column even more, and it makes me like Matt Bai as an author even more, because I really want to get into, because he seems like somebody who takes politics and the business of governance quite seriously, and I like that perspective, especially as it relates to our current day personality obsessed politics. So yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me personally to, I mean, you say it's the film's strength, and I suppose I'm inclined to agree with that sentiment, but I also think, like, I want to qualify it, because the films, by drawing so much of our attention to that, like I say, the film makes me feel terrible. Now, obviously, a lot of great films do make people feel terrible, but this does it in an indirect way, because there's little in the film itself that makes you feel terrible, maybe a little sad or a little bad, but by alluding to all of the ugliness that followed subsequent to that, that's where the really feeling bad kicks in. But at the same time, you can sort of reflect back, and the film explicitly does reflect back to for example, to the affairs of President Kennedy, which the media quite dutifully turned a blind eye. And one can, I think, quite reasonably ask whether or not that was journalistically the responsible or the ethical thing to do. And I know I understand that journalism is a hard business, and it's difficult to know exactly what is newsworthy and what isn't, how to cover a story, how to not. I staunchly disagree with one of the lines in the film about how the people should decide what is and isn't newsworthy. I think that's a horrible, despicable sentiment, actually. But at the same time, it's also understandable that if you are in the business of writing stories and you have a readership that is craving more information about something, that there's going to be a natural impulse to pursue it more. So, you have this, or I have this fantasy of having a press corps that can understand, that can draw a balance and find the nuance between a legitimate area in which it makes sense to question a candidate's moral integrity and their commitment, and their ability to keep their promises and their judgment and those sorts of things, while at the same time not hounding and harassing a candidate's teenage daughter. For fuck's sake. Oh my God, I wanted to fucking punch someone at that.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up some interesting questions that the film asks, because this has Ben Bradley, the famous publisher or editor at the Washington Post, who's been portrayed by Tom Hanks and Jason Robards and in his Watergate era, and here he is in the Gary Hart era saying, I think he says the line that you were talking about. Well, he says a line similar to that where AJ Parker, uh, who's probably one of the most brilliant journalists, one of the most brilliant characters in the film, because he represents this sort of journalistic middleman, a character who's trying to do all of the ethical things that you're talking about, but also drawn to this the market need to report upon this scandal. And Ben Bradley's character says something interesting, like AJ Parker says, we don't cover tabloid stories, and Ben Bradley says, well, we do now. And that's, I almost want to see a Ben Bradley movie about the evolution of the character from the Jason Robards All the President's Men character to the Alfred Molina, we cover tabloid stories now character. Like, how did that happen? That's an interesting character arc. So yeah, I mean, this film is including all of these questions in it, and I think it balances a lot of these things well, including some really interesting. There's a really interesting conversation between one of the campaign workers and Rice, Donna Rice. I hope I'm getting her name right. And she, like, that scene in particular was just, it was really moving. Yeah, Donna Rice. It was really moving because it showed the writer's sympathy for the quote unquote victim of this scandal. And even now she's I read an article that said that she even has PTSD like symptoms as a result of what happened to her during this campaign. So yeah, I mean, I really like this film. I'm different than, the critics have not given this Rotten Tomatoes has this at like 57%, so it's technically rotten. But I have to disagree with the critics, and I give this 3.5 stars, mainly because of the ideas in the film. I recognize that there are some issues with the pacing of the film, but overall, I really like it.
Yeah, I was glad to see that they very much humanized Donna Rice. They didn't treat her as just this sort of nameless, faceless, that they really gave her character some real weight. I was also glad that one of the women in the press room, I think, made the most cogent argument that the press should be covering it. And I won't go into the details. Suffice to say, I think the film recognized that it needed a moral argument in favor of doing what they were doing, and that character provided it quite well. There's I think a feminist sensibility to the film on both sides, as it were, and that's nice. At the same time, I can't help but thinking, there's all this question about Hart's judgment. And, I was alive during the '88 presidential campaign. I don't remember it terribly well. But I don't think that anyone questioned George H.W. Bush's judgment when he was running drugs out of Central America to fund to help fund the Iran-Contra situation when he was vice president. I mean, lots of things that the recently departed former President 41 did, which I think could easily make a case, or it demonstrated much worse judgment than anything Gary Hart did, at least on the record. So. If it's just so depressing that we couldn't have, you want scandals. There's scandals there. Innovative journalists could try to figure out ways to make the substantive stuff sexy. And I know it's not easy. It's obviously, Monday morning quarterbacking to say that you could have done it this way. But goddamn, it makes me long so much for what we as Americans, what we as human beings could have if only we could be just a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a really poignant line. And I largely agree with it. At the same time, I will notice one moment in the film. This is not too much of a spoiler. It's a little spoilery, but there's one moment in the film where Hart kind of addresses the rumors and dresses down a particular character, and then he all but says, "Now it's time to get down to policy," and he starts to talk about and then the film cuts away, and I kind of wish that the film had kept on. That's one of the moments that I think a lot of the critics who are talking about this film lacking a point of view. That's an inconsistency in the film's point of view, because at the one hand, it's trying to convince us that we really shouldn't be caring about these personality obsessed politics, but on the other hand, the film's not willing to go into Keynesian economic theory for 15 minutes out of its runtime. I'm not saying that would have made it a better film, but it certainly would have fit with the theme of the film a little bit better.
Yeah, that's true. But there were at least several scenes when he's on the campaign trail and talking about the issues. And, it's done in kind of a montage sort of way. But there is at least, you get a semblance of what Hart stood for on the issues and on the substance of things.
Sure. So, and he was right about a lot of those issues too.
I mean, but again, grass always green on the other side, right? Who knows what terrible things he might have fucked up if he, who knows if he would have won the election in the first place if he had been the candidate, and if he might have fucked up. We probably wouldn't have had a Bill Clinton if he had won. So, so many dominoes in history that go in so many different directions when you go back and change that one butterfly, as it were. But like you, I think I'm also going to give it a 3.5 stars. I think that's spot on. It's a good movie. It's not without its flaws, but in some ways its greatest flaws are also its greatest successes. It makes you feel things, or at least it made me feel things that, quite frankly, I feel too much in my normal day-to-day anyway. And I'm not saying I just want escapism from my movies, but simply drawing my attention to the awful shit that I already knew was going on isn't exactly a major cinematic accomplishment.
It is for, I don't know, maybe that gets us into a larger question about like the role that art has to play in our lives. Does it, does holding up a mirror to just how shitty reality is make a good movie?
Only kind of a, I would say only if it shows you something that was there that you didn't realize was there, and maybe for some people that this movie can have that effect. But for me, I didn't see anything that I wasn't already keenly aware of. I just didn't quite pinpoint it on this particular moment in history when it started.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. I can. And then we can make a funny Lars von Trier joke about this, about how he just shows up mirrors about how shitty the world is and. Says discuss and goes off and drinks some more alcohol. All right. Yeah, if we didn't, here's a segue for you. If Gary Hart had won the 1988 presidential campaign, then we wouldn't have Bill Clinton, and we wouldn't have the next movie, Primary Colors. This is directed by Mike Nichols, the great Mike Nichols, one of my favorite directors. Stars John Travolta, Emma Thompson, Billy Bob Thornton, Kathy motherfucking Bates, who's amazing in this film, Moira Tierney, Diane Ladd, and Adrian Lester. This tells the story of it's essentially the story of the Bill Clinton 92 campaign, but a lot of details are changed, and a lot of supposition is included, and so they changed the name of the character to Jack Stanton, although John Travolta is clearly doing a Bill Clinton impersonation. So this is sort of a fictionalized, semi-fictionalized take on the run for the White House in the Bill Clinton presidency. Or Bill Clinton's run for the White House in 92. So yeah, I'll sort of turn this over to you, Garrett. What did you think about this? Is the first time you saw this movie? Is that right?
That is right. I had never seen this film before. I was much more aware of Clinton's 92 run than I was of Hart's. In the 4 years in between, or 5 years in between, I became much more cognizant of politics. And I know Clinton as a person and as a politician much better than I knew Hart. And yeah, I don't know. I'm conflicted about this movie. I mean, on the one hand, I thought the acting was solid. I think sort of the core drama of the piece is definitely good. I think it does a good job of portraying, you know, Stanton slash Clinton as both a man who is indeed sincere but also deeply flawed. Um, you know, and from the point of view of my own personal politics, it has a much happier ending than the front runner did. But at the same time, it's it's a frustrating film in other ways. So you mentioned Kathy Bates, for example. I thought, you know, Kathy Bates was great in this movie. I thought her committing suicide was one of the cheapest, lamest, cop-out, dumbass moves I've seen in a movie in a very long time. I'm not sure if that was, you know, modeled on a real-world event, but it and you know, and they tried to sort of set it up by showing she had a history with mental illness, but nothing in the history of mental illness suggested that she was suicidal. And it just seemed like, you know, they needed to put a bow on her character's thread. They needed to tie it up, and that was the sort of to my mind, a very weak sauce way of writing her out of the story. I also felt that, you know, the film, as it was marketed and was presented, was I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the actor. Who was the actor that played
Adrian Lester?
Adrian Lester. This is Adrian Lester's film. I
Yes.
mean, he's in the vast majority of the scenes. You see,
he's the protagonist.
Yeah,
structurally.
he's the protagonist. But I had no idea he was in the film. I hadn't heard of him before as an actor. You know, I think he does an excellent job in it. But you know, Emma Thompson and
John Travolta.
John Travolta are secondary supporting characters, but you know, they had their names all over everything, and I was sort of disappointed in that. Like, if you're gonna, you know, if you're going to make Adrian Lester the heart of the movie, then you should play him up more prominently. He was, you know, he did a fine job in the acting. He's not playing a famous character in the way several of the other actors are, but still, it feels like, you know, in a really, really unfortunate way, they're taking a prominent African American actor and shoving him to the back of the bus.
That interesting phrasing there. Yeah, well, this is I mean, he's got some IMDb credits prior to Primary Colors, but from a marketing perspective, Adrian Lester in 1998 was not going to sell a movie. And he probably still won't sell a movie because he's kind of been in TV and some theater stuff. He's in Mary Queen of Scots this year, which is getting some good reviews. But he has not been a prominent actor. But yes, structurally, this is his film, and I think that the central conflict of this film is sort of a battle for Henry's soul, and at the end, he loses. And that's, I think, I took a less rosy view of, I think the film takes a less rosy view of the Clintons and the Clinton, I mean, maybe we disagree on this. Do you think that the film is portraying the Clintons positively in this movie?
I think much of the film, it portrays them positively. Obviously, when they fail the test at the you know, not quite the end, almost the end, in the third act, that makes both of them look very, very bad, and again was supposed to precipitate the suicide. They recover from that, right? They end up doing, you know, again, another frustrating thing about it is that, you know, what they ended up doing to me was obviously the right thing that they should have done. You go to your competitor and say, look, we found out about this. Someone else is going to find out about this. For your sake and for the sake of the party, you should bow out. Now, that is obviously the way you play that. You know, leaking it to the press is the wrong way to play it. Announcing it is the wrong way to play it. And I find, again, obviously, you know, it's a movie, but I find it difficult to believe that someone of you know, not just Clinton, but the whole Clinton machine's political savvy, that as an option wouldn't have occurred and at least been on the table for a point of discussion before any commitments were made about what was going to be done.
Sure. And I think this is, you know, the realism of the politics can probably be questioned. I mean, the idea that these people wouldn't think that there would be opposition research on everybody. I mean, that's a basic aspect of politics these days. Whether or not that was true in 98, 92 is 98 when the film was made, and then 92 when when the film purportedly takes place. That's sort of a different question, but opposition research is just it's basic standard operating procedure in political campaigns today. But I think that the ideas of this film are the things that I connect to most, and that it is the scene, the Kathy Bates scene, where she comes in with the information and then they fail the test. Like, that's the scene that I sort of hang my hat on in this entire film, because I think that Kathy Bates' performance is just is mind-blowing. I mean, those are definitely real. Those are not the drops. Those are real tears that she's crying, and her soul has just been crushed in that moment. And that line where it's like, we win when it's clean, because if it's clean and we still win, it means that our ideas are better. And that's the idealism that I think that the front runner tries to present as having failed, and the idealism that Primary Colors presents as what we should be searching, what we should be looking for, and then at the end it's undercut by the Clintons' political savvy and then their eventual victory in the White House. So I think it's taking a negative view because it is saying that we are not living up to the ideals articulated by Kathy Bates's character. And I think that's the heart of the movie right there.
I find that interesting because I actually thought that line was, I mean, again, it worked in the film, but in terms of the substance of it, when we're clean, we win because our ideas are better. That's just stupid on its merits. It's painfully naive, frankly. I mean, again, I'm not insensitive, obviously, to the idealism that we were talking about a second ago, but ideas, I mean, even prior to the sort of personality scandal obsessed ideas of politics, that's never been what wins campaigns. I mean, you mentioned the Nixon Kennedy debate, right, about who looked better on TV. Now, again, you can shit on that, but the fact of the matter is that most people aren't out there looking for the most cogent ideas. They're looking for, in the Karl Rove line, who you want to have a beer with, or some such. Now, given that that's sort of the realpolitik of the situation, it's not that we can't criticize politicians for engaging in mudslinging or dirty politicking or anything like that, but the alternative to that isn't having better ideas. Oftentimes it's running a better campaign. It's having a better ground game. It can be something as stupid as looking better on television. So for someone, again, who is clearly a seasoned political operative and has the political machine behind them, to say something like, when we win clean, we win because our ideas are better. No, that's just wrong. And it's objectively political science 101 wrong.
It may be objectively political science 101 wrong, but it's still the thing that I want to believe. So I don't care about your political science. I just want to believe this. I realize it's somewhat naive that I do that, but I mean, my main complaint with politics today is that we're not talking about policy, that we're not talking about that policy wonks aren't the ones that are leading the way here, that the guys or ladies with the best ideas are not the ones that are leading us, that instead we get fucking ugly movie stars. And that's a serious problem. At least the way so when I take a look at the same type of thing that you were doing with The Front Runner, when you were watching this film and then comparing it to politics today, I watch Primary Colors and compare it to politics today and say that Kathy Bates, that her character's political ideas are the ones that I want to jump onto, not necessarily the Stanton character's political ideas, not even Adrian Lester's character's political ideas, because I think Henry ends up, this is a battle, I've structured this film as a battle for Henry's soul, and it loses. I find that ending to be a bit of a tragedy, because it's a betrayal of that idealism, and isn't politics at its best form an operation of a personification of our ideals?
I think if the film was trying to set that up as a tragedy, it's a failure. It's definitely, you know, a bit of a cliffhanger, if you will. But you know, it's we're, we're not talking House of Cards here. You know, we're not finding out that the Stanton character is completely 100% morally bankrupt and just lying and manipulating people. If that was the reveal at the end, and then Henry still joined the campaign, that would be a tragedy. Instead, it's, you know, Stanton has real flaws. Failed the one test, but managed to recover. Um, I mean, I thought one of the scenes that I liked the most in the movie that stood out for me was the scene in which he's sitting down in the not the Dunkin' Donuts,
Donut shop, yeah.
at the donut
Krispy
shop,
Kreme.
talking to the guy. Now, um, thinking there's no politicking going on there. You know, it succeeded in doing exactly what it was trying to set out to do, which show that Stanton genuinely cares about people and he likes to talk to them, likes to hear what they're going through. And you know, that to me, even though again that's not ideas, that's more character, if you will, but it's good character. And you know, so it's, yeah, I agree with you everything you say about, you know, our politics should be more about ideas and policy wonks should be in charge. But those things are, you know, those things should be the center of attention, because that focuses more on understanding, what's going to be promised and what can be actually delivered. It's not because that's what wins elections. It's not because that, you know, that's how the campaigning works. That's how the governance works, and there shouldn't be a total disconnect between those two things. But we should be, you know, realists about politics enough to recognize that all the best ideas in the world, even if they are pragmatically implementable and would genuinely increase the quality of life for people in America, none of that's going to matter unless you are organized, unless you're disciplined, unless you're focused, unless you've got a team of people working with you. All that kind of realpolitik genuinely matters, and it's not something that we should view as, you know, inherently corrupting to the process, even though obviously in certain instances it can corrupt the process.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking a far more pragmatic view of it, and I'm taking a far more idealistic view of it, which I think is, both of them are fair. As a voter and as a citizen, I make my decisions based upon who has the better ideas, and how those ideas line up personally with my values. And this film came at a rather formative time for me. 1998, I was 18 years old. You know, I was just getting the right to vote, and that scene became pivotal in how I function as a citizen. No bullshit. Like, I remember, I've only seen this movie once before I rewatched it for this podcast, and I still remember. I think I've actually quoted that line to you off air at during some of our regular political discussions, because that moment and that idea is instrumental to how we think beyond party and how we think about how we should make our decisions as voters and as citizens, I think. And I'm not discounting the ground game. I'm not discounting the idea that you have to, you know, go out there and meet the voters, and that you have to have you know, I'm not these days a cogent social media message. I'm not discounting any of that stuff, but what informs all of that is that you have good ideas behind your campaign, and that you are a serious person who's interested in serious governance, rather than bullshit and the Gary Hart shit that we were talking about just a little while ago. And I think that the dichotomy that Kathy Bates, that Libby sets up, Kathy Bates's character, that she sets up, is if you attack him personally, then you are no longer attacking based upon ideas. I think that works dramatically within the film. And so for that, in that sense, it works for me. Now, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying about how the film's structured, and, you know, some of the Kathy Bates suicide, Libby's suicide. And even I think there's the early scene where he emerges from a room with Allison Janney in some they're both undressed. It's implied that they had an affair. that scene should not be there, because if the entire dramatic question of this film is going to be whether or not Stanton fucks around, and you show us him fucking around in literally the first scene, then you've undercut your dramatic tension throughout the entire film. So I think that structurally there are problems, but that one scene and the ideas that sort of undergird this film were foundational for me as I was understanding how I fit in the giant political so what.
Maybe I'm letting my opinion of Bill Clinton color my thinking of the film here, but I never thought it was any doubt about whether or not Stanton fucks around. Not just because of the scene with Allison Janney, but simply because I thought it was pretty obvious that he fucked around, and we're supposed to consider that to be a serious flaw on his part.
And so do I. But then how does that sort of run in contradiction to what we were saying about Gary Hart just 5 minutes ago?
Right. And again, this is where the future events not depicted in the movie, Clinton didn't just cheat on his wife, he fucked a subordinate, and that's a huge no-no. I mean, that's beyond simply infidelity. But again, those aren't depicted.
Right. Now we're sort of getting beyond the. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking structurally within the film, even if I'm not even thinking about the Clintons as people, if I'm just thinking about the film as what is the dramatic question that gets built up later on, and that is whether or not Stanton is a philanderer, and you show us being a philanderer in the first scene of the film, you're undercutting the later scene's tension. So yeah, I was basically just pointing out a little flaw in the film that I found, but the thing that I like about it is the ideas and the idealism at the end. I remember this being like a 5-star film, but on rewatch it had dropped. It was down to like a 3.5, 4-star film. What about you, Garrett? This is your first go around. What do you think?
I give it a 3. I thought it was entertaining. It was reasonably informative, but I also felt that it had some serious flaws in terms of its political ethos, and in terms of the message it was trying to send, and the degree to which I think it got politics right was disappointing.
Sure, that's fair criticisms. And then, of course, this sort of pragmatic versus idealistic debate could probably go on for quite some time, I'm sure. But we will move on to our trailer reactions. Which one do you want to start with first? The good, the bad, or the medium?
Why don't we start with the bad?
The bad. All right. The Lion King trailer dropped, and it has currently 11,721,779 views on fucking YouTube. Yeah, okay. So do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't know entirely what to say about this. I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand The Lion King. Or maybe we just start with that. I was never a big fan of the original film. I mean, I didn't hate it. I certainly saw its general merit. I don't think it quite deserved the classic status that it's sort of come to garner, which is weird because I think I in the ideal demographic when it was released. I was the target audience, but it just didn't really do anything for me. I think it's an entirely mediocre and forgettable film. That having been said, if there's anything that gives me any hope at all, it's not what I see in the trailer, it's who I see involved in the picture. I think Jon Favreau is a talented director. I am a big fan of Donald Glover. It's always nice to see James Earl Jones return to a role. He can, read anything as far as I'm concerned, and his voice is going to be appealing. So there, it's not without its potential to be good and its potential promise. At the same time, I mean, they're strangely calling this a live action. It's very clearly CGI. I'm not sure why it's getting called live action when it's not. And so I suppose what I'll say is I'll try to leave my mind open to this. I hope I'm wrong, but this just looks awful.
Yeah, it's shot for shot remake of the original. I mean, line by line, shot for shot. I mean, did they even have James Earl Jones come back in and read the part, or did they just splice together what he did in 1994? This is it is there are comparisons on Twitter, a side-by-side comparisons of the original Lion King and the Lion King remake. This is right alongside the Beauty and the Beast thing, where it was a live action remake, and yet it was shot for shot. The hope that I will pin my hope, like you, on Jon Favreau. I was cynical about the Jungle Book remake, and I thought that they did some interesting things, and that I thought that kind of worked. I did not like the Beauty and the Beast remake, but judging from the buzz that this trailer is getting, this movie is going to make all of the money. And that is depressing, and not surprising, but depressing, because it's sooner or later, we're just going to be, I mean, what are they going to do? Do an animated version of the live action movies that they had? I mean, this is, oh shit, I just gave them a bad idea. It reminds, it's the cynical, these are the cynical parts of Disney that I don't like. This is how Disney becomes just about brand awareness and making money and on and on and on. And I agree with you. This is not live action. This is CGI. This is animated. What the hell is this doing?
I've never thought Disney was anything other than cynical brand identification. So this to me isn't a change. I'm not really a fan of Disney, if I can be perfectly honest.
And so, do you want to talk about the next Disney trailer? The Toy Story 4 is coming out. This was just a teaser trailer. We've got a little sketch from Key and Peele, and then this it's clouds both sides now, I believe. And there's a sort of circle shot of all of the Toy Story characters. It's sort of just a teaser trailer reminding us that Toy Story 4 is coming out, and that is going to make all of the money as well. Soon there will be no more money left because Disney will have it all. What do you think about, did this tease you into going to watch Toy Story 4?
Like you say, I think this one is the in-between for me. I have been very pleasantly surprised by the Toy Story films. It seemed to me the first film very much, lightning in a bottle. I didn't think there was any need to come back to do a sequel. I thought the second one was not as good, but still surprisingly good. And then the third one came back and was like almost as good as the very first one, possibly even as good. So far, I've been quite surprised by this series. Hoping for more. I think Key and Peele are always excellent. I think their little teaser was wonderful. The Joni Mitchell teaser was well done and well executed. I am concerned about where they go with it thematically.
They really shut down the story after 3, didn't they?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, but again, I thought they shut down the story after 1, but they managed to keep it going much more effectively than I would have imagined. So maybe I'm going to be wrong here, so I have higher hopes, but still not through the roof.
Yeah, in both of these cases, I think we trust the creatives behind this, but not necessarily the idea of actually making the film. I was not aware that there was a Toy Story 4 in development, and then this teaser trailer did its job because it let me know that there was a Toy Story 4 in development. So I like the creatives. I like everybody behind the series, and I like everybody behind the Lion King series, or Lion King film. John Oliver, Beyonce in the same film. What? Yes, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting summer when these two films come out. And we've got the good, the bad, and the ugly. Or I guess maybe Toy Story 4 wasn't necessarily ugly. Here's the good. Captain Marvel released a trailer. This is the second trailer for Captain Marvel. I think we're getting a better idea of what this film is going to be, a better idea of the look of Brie Larson. We also get to see more time with Samuel L. Jackson and the cat. As if we weren't going to go see the Captain Marvel movie anyway. What did you think of the Captain Marvel trailer?
I need to seriously start deflating my expectations because I think this looks fantastic, and I think it's going to be really hard for the film to actually live up to what it's appearing to be in my own head. Um, So yeah, I love the first trailer. I love this trailer. I want to see this film now. I don't want to wait for it. It looks to me really really solid. I love the idea of living in a world where Samuel L. Jackson can be young again. You know, that's fantastic. And yeah, no, I think Brie Larson, looks great. Her costuming looks great. If I have any concerns at all, I think some of the lines in the trailer, out of context, seem perhaps a little corny. But I'm kind of trusting that in context it will feel less so. I think going back in time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to what was happening in the '90s, to see Nick Fury sort of cutting his teeth, I think that's a really interesting tease for me. So yeah, I need to start deflating what I want out of this film, because if I don't bring it down, it's going to have to be just damn near perfect in order to satisfy me.
Well, I mean, it'll probably be Marvel formula, but I think one of the interesting things about the trailer that I got from it is that it's trying to redo the origin story format so that the central conflict of the film is the character finding out her origins rather than, he gets bit by a spider and then he discovers his powers and then he practices with his powers for a montage and then suddenly he's perfect with his powers. I think this is interesting. Like it's doing the origin story, but it's doing a different take on it. And I think that was one of the quotes from the creatives behind it, and I'm excited about how it's able to do that. I think that's a clever idea to try to change up the origin story formula, and so I'm excited about that. And the action looked really well done. Captain Marvel action was pretty cool, and of course her beating up an old lady, which we saw in the first trailer. I guess we see an extended scene of her beating up an old lady. So that was, elder abuse is always fun. I'm joking. Don't take that out of context. Okay. So yeah, I'm excited for this film as well. We're getting an Avengers 4 trailer tomorrow. The rumors are we're getting an Avengers 4 trailer tomorrow. Whether or not that's actually going to happen, we'll find out tomorrow. But I'm probably looking forward to Avengers 4 a little bit more than Captain Marvel, but Captain Marvel is certainly up there. I want to see this character in action, and so I'm looking forward to that as well. So, all right. Well, that's this episode of Jim and Garrett at the Movies. Join us next week where we will be talking about Wag the Dog. We'll be doing something a little bit different, so stay tuned next week. It'll be an interesting episode, and then we'll probably be taking a couple weeks off for our holiday break. Garrett and I are both, well, I'm traveling, so we'll be off the air for a couple weeks, but next week we'll have something about Wag the Dog, continuing kind of our political conversation. So if you enjoyed this, you'll definitely enjoy next week's conversation as well. So my name is Jim.
And I'm Garrett.
And this is Jim and Garrett at the Movies. Good night.